Welcome to the WriterDojo with your host, Steve Diamond.
Buenos dias.
And Larry Correia.
If at first you don't succeed, call it an airstrike.
Today's episode, Writing for Video Games.
All right, everybody, welcome to the WriterDojo again. In our ongoing quest to make sure we get all of the cool people at LibertyCon. We're here again. We're not quite sure in what order these are gonna air in, but today we wanted to bring you something really different and really cool. You all know by now how both Larry and I adore video games. For us, this is really video games are really mine and Larry's way in different ways actually, but it's our way to decompress, to refill the buckets, sharpen the saw, as we've said before, Larry. Larry, you're more of a Twitch shooter.
I'm more, first
PvP
person
guy.
shooter, PvP, a lot of World of Tanks for a lot of years.
World of Tanks, Call of Duty.
Last couple of years has been a lot of Call of Duty.
Yeah.
And you're more of a role-playing game, RPG, adventure game kind of
game. I'm your typical Final Fantasy nerd. Final Fantasy VI is my favorite game of all time. But I'm also a big adventure guy. Uncharted, Ghost of Tsushima, which you and I have talked about freaking ad nauseum. Great game. Yeah. That game is awesome. We love those sorts of games, right? Now today, we've got a great guest with us, Brian Urbanek.
Good morning.
Brian, how about you introduce yourself and tell people what you do, who you are, and I think this will shed light on why Larry and I are so excited to have you with us today. And hey, thank you so much for making time with us. It's kind of crazy at the con and schedules are wonky, so thank you so much for making the time to talk with us today.
Absolutely my pleasure. Fan of the show. My name is Brian. I've been working in the video games industry for about 30 years. My title is a systems designer, and that means, in general, I'm responsible for the design aspect of a video game that deals with motivations, actions that players can take, anything involving a number ever or math. That's all kind of my world.
It's interesting to me. You and I were chatting a little bit, I think it was yesterday, and you have a presentation today at LibertyCon none of you can take advantage of that when we're recording right now, but you were showing me a little bit of your presentation, and one of the screenshots you showed me was of the game Elden Ring.
Yep.
You're a fan, I'm a fan. That game it's really cool to play. It's difficult, but in a fun, good way. And it's of the opening scene where you walk out kind of after the tutorial and you get killed. You walk out and it's just this nice sweeping vista, okay? But then you showed me your next slide and it's just, okay, this is how storytelling is done in a video game. You see this over there, this is where you're gonna go. Oh, over there, that's where you're hopefully gonna go if you don't, rage quit the game at some point. This is your immediate place. This is this. And in a lot of games, I think you said something to me to the effect of, you guys as writers have paragraphs to explain and show what a kind of like what an environment is supposed to be and where you're going to be going with your story. In video games, there's a lot of visual and contextual storytelling.
Yeah, a good analogy to start with is the way a director needs to think about structuring a shot, right? Where they have an infinite number of choices of things which are probably more implied than said in a prose structure, right? We have to care about the lighting, we have to care about where the sight lines are and where the eye is being traded by all the different shape of the geography. The trick is, in any kind of open worldish game, like Call of Duty or like especially Elden Ring, there's an extra layer where everywhere you can see, you need to be able to, you can either go, or you now have to have a good reason why you can't go there. And so all of that needs to be thought about in a very careful, structured way. So the opening of Elden Ring is, I pull up because that game, I could talk for hours about its flaws or days about its virtues.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you.
Every single element in that first moment when you step into Limgrave is bloody art, right? The way the sight lines all point you directly towards your destination, the way you get to see the knight on the horseback who's your first challenge, and you get to understand where he is and appreciate his position. You can see your medium destination of the castle on the hill. You can see your far destination of the Elden Tree far in the background, and the sight lines of the way things are located in the scene and the way the geography points you at different spots in the visual it's just masterful. And it's a thing that when you break it down and show it to someone the way my slide does, which actually calls out all these lines and such forth, it reveals that this is intentional, this is deliberate, this is a structured, crafted thing.
It's brilliant because it's like, honestly, it's the same way when you're telling a traditional prose novel story. You want to draw out the same stuff, only an entirely different tool set.
Yes.
Yeah. You can see why, I think you guys can see why Larry and I were so stoked to have Brian on the show today, because it is really interesting. Larry and I harp on storytelling in games a lot.
Yeah, actually, because even though this is a show about, just writing in general, but we're novelists, but we do bring up a lot of video game analogies on the show, or examples of good storytelling or bad storytelling from video games. Well,
and I think the mistake that a lot of us make is that we say, we just look at the way, lines of dialogue are said in a show or in a video game. But, when you listen to how Brian talks about it and how you frankly eloquently break it down, you understand that, oh man, there is so much more to storytelling within a video game. Now, part of this is because we want you guys to understand that the only path, the paths forward, there's never just one path. If you want to start talking about and going into storytelling in the video games industry, my goodness, there are so many options. What kind of avenues are there available for people who want to be telling stories within the video games industry?
So obviously being a writer, because many games have dialogue or written text, and that is the exclusive domain of people who have the title writer or narrative designer. Mm-hmm. But I like to believe that in my own way, I am something of a storyteller too, though in a different medium, right? My storytelling is making the combat system feel like the kind of game you're playing. So in Call of Duty, combat is extremely fast, extremely crisp, extremely lethal. Whereas in a superhero game, the combat would always be something that's more drawn out over a battle. Whereas the stakes raise, your ability to deliver efficacy in the world raises. Right? In a cop drama, we're always going to have a thing where you don't die quickly, but you get wounded and your performance suffers to create a rising tension spiral. Similarly, if you're doing a zombie horror game. In an epic fantasy game, we're going to take a different arc, right? So make it try to feel like Lord of the Rings. And so, in my way, I think those mechanics are storytelling. And then there's the sound design, right? Like everything that is storytelling collaborative in a movie applies to video games too, right? The lighting, the level. Oh God. In Warzone, our maps, we put a lot of effort into trying to have implied stories in the structure and visuals of the map, and just the way they feel when you move through them is supposed to be evocative of different geographic regions, of different types of conflict, etc. And we all think of that as a level of storytelling.
That's actually really interesting because I play a lot of Call of Duty, and I played a lot of Warzone, I played a lot of DMZ, played a lot of Plunder, and I know Al Mazrah like the back of my freaking hand. And before this, I knew Verdansk like the back. I'm the driver of my team, right?
Okay.
Because I'm the one with the sense of direction. And it's funny too because we're at this point, because tell the story. It's like we're like it's North Construction Tower, South Construction Tower. We know exactly where big building, Channel 7. I mean, we're just communicating to each other. We know this world, and it is, and there's little nuggets in there that you guys do put, and the note system where there's different locked rooms and there's notes and the events that happened. And for us nerdy guys that love that stuff, we collect the notes and oh man, something tragic happened here. it is really interesting because that's a thing that we don't get to do in novels as much because we don't get to like spell that stuff out because that just takes space in words.
Right.
And this is contextual and it's organic.
Yes.
You know, and so I think you guys did a great job on that.
Thank you.
I'm curious as to your own. I know you work in kind of you work in the Call of Duty. You work with Call of Duty. You're working as Call of Duty. That's what you do is your job and stuff. What are your actual video game preferences? I'm curious.
If a game was made by more than 4 people, I'm probably not interested. I spend a lot of time deep diving into the indie space. So Call of Duty is magnificent for the production values it brings, but because it is, I mean, this is all public numbers, an $8 billion revenue stream, there is a great deal of risk aversion in how much they can deviate from the formula that our customers have clearly indicated they want.
Sure.
Right? Whereas the small indie game made by a half dozen people has a much greater freedom to take risks. And frankly, I find a lot of lovely, wonderful ideas in that space. And there's a bunch of games out there I would sing the praises of for days.
So when you're, I know this is what happens with Larry and I. If we go to read someone else's book, a lot of times it's really, really hard for us to turn off like critical editor brain.
Sure.
Does that happen to you when you're playing like say an indie game? Does that happen to you?
Yes, but because my specialty is semantics, it would be like if maybe an analogy would be someone whose specialty is dialogue, and they could ignore how a writer they're reading has a crappy plot or crappy scene structure if they have really snappy dialogue.
Sure.
Right? And so for myself, my 25-cent word is ludonarrative, right? Which is the idea of, do the game mechanics reflect the feeling of the game I'm playing? Mm-hmm. And so if I'm playing a game where the mechanics are really well reflective and evocative of the story I'm in, that draws my attention. I can focus on that and ignore everything else.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I do the thing where like I'll read a book and my brain starts to like, oh, that was really clever. Like if it was, I get kicked out of the story because it's like, oh, that was really good. Or I'll get kicked out of the story. It's like, oh man, you should have did this and this and this. And I imagine if you're playing it like mechanically, it's like a wonky mechanic or a mechanic that doesn't fit the storyline. You know, it's like, oh, screw this crap.
I did profanity and blah 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 blah. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. So.
Chuck the controller across the room.
Well, maybe not. Man, they're so expensive now. I don't think I can. Oh man.
Oh no, I got an Elite controller. I ain't throwing that thing.
Oh, did you get that?
Yeah. Sweet.
I almost bought the PlayStation equivalent, but you know, I gotta get a job again first. So.
Mouse and keyboard only, please.
Oh, you're one of those.
Yes.
Those
yes.
elitists.
Absolutely so.
My son's in the room with us as our making sure that we're not being stupid with the equipment, and he just nodded his agreement with Brian. So my son is a PC Master Race guy as well.
Man, I've been shot by a lot of people on mouse and keyboard, so I can't say nothing. Yeah. I've lost to a lot of people on mouse and keyboard.
That is no excuse. We have so much compensatory code in to make sure console's competitive.
Oh no, I'm competitive. No, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not a whiner. I know. I have a positive KD. All right.
Fair enough.
I have a good KD.
I'm curious for you, Brian. What is it that makes really good story design within a game for you?
Wow. Depends entirely on the game I'm playing.
Okay.
Right.
Context specific.
Context specific.
Real context specific. Like the place where I'm going to, I mean, let's be honest, Warzone literally doesn't have a story. There's an implied conflict, right? But it is never spelled out anywhere. And I'm going to get in trouble for this. We don't even have an internal story for it. Like we have a sketch, but that's not the point of it, right? And so that's okay.
Yep.
But if I'm playing a character-focused RPG, that's going to matter and mean a lot. I don't know, it's not necessarily open the question, but I just remember there's the most recent RPG, Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous.
Yes.
Right? there was one particular moment where there's a character you've been adventuring with for a while, and he's a paladin, and his entire plot line is built around trying to find his brother. And eventually you find a group of dead Hell Knights who are typically not the enemies of his order, but they're their rivals. And one of the dead Hell Knights is a female, and she had his brother's shield. And then he goes off in this rant about, oh my god, like, how did she get it? Was she his best friend, and he gave it to her as a gift and a token of trust and honor, and therefore this person should have been my sister who I celebrated? Did she kill him and steal it from him, and therefore she'd be my enemy? I have no idea, and I can never know because she's dead. And just it was neat because it was a character of this existential crisis over. Anyway, it was just a few lines of text, but it just really stayed with me, and I love stuff like that.
Interesting. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation, talking about Brian. As you can see, we're all pretty excited about this conversation. This is fun stuff. We all love this sort of stuff. So give us a couple minutes, and we'll be right back.
A lone boy, orphaned by the Nazis and imprisoned in a concentration camp. A dragon-like being elected to the leadership of the galactic government. What do these two beings have in common? Why would they meet in one of the most war-torn regions of Earth? What will it mean for Earth and for the galaxy? Will this be one of the greatest friendships in galactic history, or the death of us all? Blood Brothers Meetings by Stephanie Osborne, a first-in-series spin-off of the Division 1 series. Available May 1st. Pick up your copy today.
And we're back. Okay. First chunk, the show, we were talking about kind of contextual storytelling and, you know, how it differs and how it like so radically differs in a video game and how there's so many more different aspects that you have to talk about. So one of the things that's kind of on our whole crew's mind here, Brian, is how does one get involved in this line of business?
So today, if anyone, for those who are college age, there's actually pretty decent programs at different schools. I've personally worked with people from Rice and Full Sail who have excellent skills. That being said, I'm going to caution there's a lot more college degree in game development programs than there are roles in the industry or necessarily talent teaching those classes. So be very careful what you're signing up for, but it is a path. For myself, my bachelor's degree is in computer science. I trained as an engineer. I was doing master's work in artificial intelligence when I was recruited to industry, and I sort of dropped out of school to go do that because that's why I was going to school in the first place. And along the way, I took a minor in creative writing and economics because I was sort of inventing my own education path, what I thought game design would be. In my world, well, as a designer, extensive breadth of knowledge is important. I consider it important to study sociology, psychology, history, economics, like all those things come into my daily job, yes, even on Call of Duty. In writing, and specifically for this group, I have a strong suggestion. There is a freeware piece of program called Ink by the company Inkle, who's a delightful bunch of fellows, and they make a bunch of visual novel games. They're available like 80 days around the world and whatnot. And their development suite of software called Ink it's free. It is a markup language, so it's not much more complicated than, say, for example, the markup involved in building a screenplay. And it allows anyone without technical skills to make interactive visual novels. And I would strongly suggest anyone who's interested in the gaming industry as a writer, get that. Build something in that. Try writing scenes that branch. Context. The best writer I've ever worked with in the games industry, she's a delightful human being, and like the first week on the job, she asked to be cross-trained as a mission designer because she wanted to understand the tool our mission designers used so she could write missions that fit into the limitations and strengths of the tooling that we have to use to develop missions and present them to the players. And so that allowed her to do really well-crafted stuff where the requirements fit what we could deliver. because we can't deliver everything. We can't deliver all possible options when we build missions.
Right, because you're working within the limitations of the program.
Yeah.
It's not like we're writing a book. I can do whatever my imagination says. You got to pay a lot of guys a lot of hours of programming to be able to do whatever you want. That's actually really interesting. I never thought of that limitation.
Yeah. Similarly, something if on a bigger end, like if someone has, for example, already successful authors and they're interested in having an IP be converted to the games industry, there's considerations that need to be thought about. So, for example, it is nothing but a rhetorical flourish for you to add a centaur character to a party in a fantasy game, right? In the game world, oh dear God, because the animation rig of a human is not the animation rig of a centaur. So that for your rhetorical flourish, that is 3 man-months. I worked out with my animator because this is part of my talk, of work to generate that asset and those animations and those textures and that model for that new character. And then your level design team has to go through and make sure, are all the doorways wide enough? Are all those spaces between chairs and tables in the building you're going to walk through wide enough for a centaur to get through? How is it going to clip? Oh God, now we have to rework all the armor so that the big old horse butt doesn't clip through the back half of the armor, yada and yada and yada. Oh, what if he has a two-handed sword on his back? Well, crap, now he just cut himself in half visually, right? And it's a lot of work for us that is just a flourish for y'all.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we don't have bug. I mean, we have typos in novels, but we don't have game-breaking bugs.
We don't have clipping issues.
Yeah. It's like I finished the entire last half of Cyberpunk 2077 with my hands, my character's hands being connected to the bottom of the screen the entire time I was doing the spaghetti fingers, and that's how I played the entire last half of the game because of that, and I couldn't get rid of it, and it's I'm sure that was just some rhetorical flourish on some animation that never went away.
I can visualize the code bug which would generate that and why it happened. But yeah.
It was very much. It's well, I guess this is just my life now.
Yep. Congratulations, you have spaghetti fingers. It's a free cybernetic upgrade. Enjoy.
Working as intended, Larry.
Yeah, it was all part of the game. I didn't even think of that. That's interesting because the media it's funny because as more we talk to different people from different fields of creative stuff, different artistic fields. It's interesting because each one of us has to work within the limitations of our field. And we talk about movies a lot on the show and TV shows, but they're working on an entirely different thing. And so this is the first time we've had someone working in your field, and it's just stuff I never thought of. So that's actually really kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm glad that is the point of the talk because I'm friends with you. I'm friends with many authors, and frankly, I wanted to do some of these talks just to help introduce y'all to that world and teach you to think about it. Because frankly, I would love to have some of the writing and creativity I see from yourself, from the other Bane authors, some of the other delightful authors here at LibertyCon, come into my world and bring some of that creativity. But I need to educate y'all so you come into it with your eyes open.
Right. I mean, there's a slightly okay history of some fairly big, well-known authors that have done writing for video games. I mean, I know Orson Scott Card did one a while back.
Oh, Dave Wolverton.
Dave Wolverton has.
That was StarCraft.
Yep. Bob Salvatore did for the ill-fated Kingdoms of Amalur.
Don't cite that one. Orson Scott Card has a unfair advantage in that his kid, who's a real nice dude, I worked with him briefly in Seattle, is in the game industry as a developer. Mm-hmm. So he was able, I'm sure, to teach his dad how to approach it and think about it. Similarly, Terry Pratchett's daughter is a very talented game developer.
Oh, no way.
Yep.
Interesting.
Huh. That's interesting.
It's a talented family.
No kidding. Good grief. Freaking Terry Pratchett.
Having Terry Pratchett as your dad, you'd think he'd turn out okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. My daughter's still trying to get a job. No. And she's going to listen to this episode. Sorry.
So there's something that you brought up a little bit ago that I think I want to talk about for a sec. In stories, in novels, the idea is to put our characters and give our characters choices that they have to make. A lot of times, Larry and I talk about making our characters, putting them in a situation where they have to make the best bad decision or whatever in their story. But you said something about, you're talking about branching narratives and there's only certain amounts of choice that you have. I'm really interested in video game design, the illusion of choice.
It is sometimes illusion of choice and sometimes not. So if it's an illusion, it's usually because of just developmental limitations, i.e. we can only make so many assets, and any asset we make that the player never sees is wasted money. Right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to try to turn the people through. And so, but even the illusion of choice, there's is just our artistic integrity, for I think the best way to say it, that we want to make that choice feel as impactful as we can within our development budget. Mm-hmm. A slight tangent. This is something that I couldn't fit in my slide that I would love a chance to talk about.
Yeah, let's do it.
The Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Okay.
Perfectly entertaining. I enjoyed it. Not the best movie ever, whatever. But it used one of my absolute favorite tropes from my tabletop games.
Okay.
Right? Towards the end of the movie, they've beaten their rival. They've rescued the daughter. They've got the resurrection foozle. They have literally all the money. They are on the boat sailing away. By the motivations of those characters, they are completely free and clear. They've won. They are out. No one's chasing them. There's no consequences. And then they turn around and they see, oh, the place we just left is in deep danger, and only we can stop it and save it. And so now they have a choice of abandon the safety they've earned and take a risk to do the right thing, or just keep going. In a novel, okay, whatever. But when it's a game, when it's a tabletop RPG, because in that kind of world, that's a real choice. Like a good GM is going to say, okay, yes, you actually can freely get away, and there'll be ramifications later, but I'm not going to make the payoff you earned invalid, just you're making a choice, only consequences. And so, to me, it's like in a movie it's not as impactful, but in a game, that's huge, to make the players choose to go back into danger. And that's the thing that I think we can do in games sometimes, is make you choose to embrace danger to serve a better purpose.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. Larry and I are, you can't see us obviously, but Larry and I are kind of like staring at each other. We're seeing each other's wheels work in our heads. We're like, huh.
Well, every now and then a guest throws something else. Is like, I got to process that for a
second.
Well, because I'm Steve's GM usually.
Yeah.
And if I give his characters a choice of just go off and have the easy life or go do the right. Steve's character's taking the easy life.
Oh yeah.
And I know that's like usually I gotta appeal to the lawful good characters in the group.
What are you suggesting, Larry?
We all know the characters you play, man. You just can't help it. Even when we do randomly generated characters, Steve still.
Now, if you give me the choice of, hey, Steve, you can play it safe, or you can go assassinate that cool person over there.
Oh yeah.
I'll totally do the assassination
route.
An
Opportunity for murder. Okay, that's an interesting thing too. So, okay, and this is I guess a game design thing. Morality. For when you're designing your games, and like as we talk about, as we joke about Call of Duty, war crime simulator.
Yeah,
and okay, so how do you guys tackle that when you're talking about like player choice and you're coming at it, and because you got to work within the limitations of your market and your marketing, and I mean how is that to work with in like limitations and whatnot?
Oh golly. Need to be real careful here. At Activision,
don't say anything.
At Activision, we have teams of lawyers. Enough said.
Okay, yeah.
Speaking personally, my lines are a bit interesting. My lines really come down to choice. So, two classic examples I like to think of is Grand Theft Auto 2.
Oh yeah.
Yes, murder and homicide simulator, yada yada. But I respect the hell of it because it was entirely possible to play a perfectly pacifist bounty hunter, only get money by turning in bad guys to the cops run. You could choose to play a perfectly virtuous run, and thus I forgave everything, right? Conversely, the first GoldenEye game on the Super Nintendo within the first 4 minutes of the game, you are forced in a cinematic moment to execute a person that you had surprised, captured, bound, and rendered helpless. And that is absolutely off limits. I would never have condoned that. Where I force you as a player to passively watch yourself commit that act.
Yeah.
Player choice. Remember, it's just like a tabletop sin when you remove the player choice
Yes.
and you force the
You
player to
railroad
do
them.
something that's against their whatever their code is. You've like violated the primary rule of being a GM, right?
Yes.
And it's just interesting to see that extrapolate, because there have been times, and you mentioned Grand Theft Auto. That's a great example. I've played that, and what was the one with the murderous hillbilly character? You guys know the?
I think that's 5.
Okay, so 5. So I could stand playing the murderous hillbilly character, but somebody pointed out, I was like, dude, he's just holding up a mirror to the player base. It's like I'm gonna go blow up this busload of school children because I can get I can get an achievement for that.
Maybe that was 4.
Might have been 4. I can't
I think
remember.
that was 4 actually.
Oh,
Anyway,
no, 4 is Nico Bellic. You were the
right.
Eastern European. That was another one where you could be relatively good if you wanted to, and most of us just didn't. Let's be honest.
But that's okay, because like I have no problem allowing players to play out in a safe, not real fantasy being a scumbag, because it's just a game, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, and if you go Saints Row, it's comedic effect level of scumbag.
Really is.
Fine. My line is that the lack of choice. I force you to engage in a thing.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Metal Gear games, Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, of course.
And I was playing through 5, and at a certain point, I was just kind of playing through the game, suppress shooting dudes in the head from here and there. And there came a point where I said, you know what? I think it'd be much more interesting to play this game completely no kill. Let's see what happens. So I restarted. And I'm not going to lie, I was super motivated by the trophies in the game because I am that guy.
Psychological manipulation. Right?
Yes, platinum trophies, here I come. So I started over and I started playing the game. I was going for a complete pacifist, no kill. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, not true pacifism. I was still knocking people out, but going through that. And for me, the game there's a big storied insanity controversy around that game and how they treated Kojima, how he left the company, or how he was left, voluntold to leave the company. And so the whole last act is a story-wise, it's a mess in terms of writing and storytelling. But as soon as, I flip that switch and I'm playing it that way, I had a much more enjoyable experience. It was a different challenge. It changed the way I saw how the story was going. It was very interesting that way. I don't know, when you brought up when you guys brought up the Grand Theft Auto thing, that's what.
Well, there's a few that do a good job on that, and some that there's moments where they struggle. Where we're talking about that the writing, the research. I'm thinking of Red Dead Redemption.
Sure.
Moments of just absolute writing brilliance, and other moments where you get forced into something that I don't think that this character should do that. Another one I think did a fantastic job was Ghost of Tsushima, which we mentioned. Like some of the writing on that was like literally as a samurai movie dork, just literally brilliant. And it actually had a fairly decent morality thing too, where you could be a vengeful murder god.
But that's baked into the story,
was.
They make you feel like they're like, you just saw what happened to you.
I just like the
You
fact
can
that
go that route.
The
Cool.
weather gets worse the more murderous you become.
Yeah.
On the island, that was just a great little effect.
Well, and in terms, like what you've been talking about, Brian, some of the more contextual storytelling, just their screen lack of HUD in that game. You want to go to your waypoint? Oh yeah, click the button, and the wind that shows up on the screen will tell you the direction to go. No. Like there's just cool choices like that I think you can only do in a video game. You know what I mean?
I could see a book where like a character meditates on the way, and then the wind spirits sort of nudge in the way. Sure. But yeah, Yes, my form does permit a lot of very innovative things because we can add sound, we can add motion on the screen, and it is a fun thing. Like much respect to Dead Space, right, which put the health bar for your character in the lights on the back of your suit.
Yep.
Right, so when you look at yourself, you're looking at your health bar. Clever like that is it's wonderful.
No, and Dead Space is awesome. Dead Space is awesome.
I didn't play that one, so
It's really super good space horror.
Yeah, heard that's good.
Oh yeah, and they put out a remake just recently of it. So, all right. As much as we'd love to keep talking about this, I mean, we could all. I think the three of us could probably talk about video games for the next.
I've got to go beyond the
20 days.
The guest banquet thingy.
Yeah, and
I have to go see you and toast you.
Oh, you're on that? Oh yeah. Okay. We got to go.
All right, so guys, everybody, thank you so much for listening to us. Brian, thank you so much for making the time to come chat with us about this. We really appreciate you having on the show. It was awesome chatting with you about this stuff. And all you listeners out there, if you have any other questions about this sort of stuff, because this is kind of a whole new topic in a way, please send them our way. We can always call and get Brian back on the phone or whatever and have him chat with us some more and answer some of your questions. So shoot some of that stuff our way and we'll work something out. So again, thank you guys so much. This is the Writer Dojo, and we'll see you on the next one.
Writer Dojo is Steve Diamond and Larry Correia. Produced by Jack Wilder and Bear and Hare Studios. Theme song, Word Mercenaries by Craig Nivo. New episodes come out every Wednesday wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/WriterDojo, by leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on the Writer Dojo, email ads@writerdojo.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to questions@writerdojo.com.
Also, I'm a rat. I hide in the corner. That's how I win Warzone.